So here we go. Thank you for joining us for our Healthy Kids survey event. We're so very delighted to have Christina and Fran from our Health Services Department. And I'm just going to let you guys take it away. So thank you so much from all of us at Jeffco PTA for spending your time with us.
Great. Thank you so much, Shauna. Good afternoon, members of the Jeffco PTA. My name is Christina Kane, and I'm joined by Fran Tapper. We are the District Healthy Schools Coordinators, and we're here to share some of the data findings from the Healthy Kids Colorado survey administered in fall of 2019. We will present and then take questions at the end. Okay, so what is the Healthy Kids Colorado survey? The Healthy Kids Colorado survey is Colorado's only comprehensive survey on the health and well-being of young people in 6th to 12th grade. The purpose of the survey is to better understand youth health and what factors support youth to make healthy choices. The survey is completely anonymous and voluntary. The Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment and the Colorado School of Public Health help to administer the survey across Colorado every 2 years. We are here today to share our 2019 data findings and celebrate that this is Jeffco's first Healthy Kids Colorado survey representative data set. In 2011 and 2013, Jeffco selected not to participate due to the sensitive nature of some of the questions. In 2015 and 2017, Jeffco participated with an active consent model that did not result in enough student participation. In preparation for the fall of 2019 administration, Dr. Jason Glass, then superintendent of Jeffco schools, waived the active consent policy, allowing Jeffco to join the vast majority of school districts across the state that use a passive consent model. Families were given the opportunity to opt out of the survey if they desired. This resulted in Jeffco receiving enough participation for our first ever representative data set. Although we recognize that fall of 2019, when this survey was conducted, was very, very different for our students and community, we believe that there is still value in this data snapshot regarding the health and well-being of our students. Multitasking. So fall 2019 was the largest Healthy Kids Colorado administration to date. In the state of Colorado, over 100,000 students participated. In Jeffco, 22 schools participated, 14 being part of the state sample. Student participation in the Healthy Kids Colorado survey is completely anonymous and voluntary. No student names, IDs, or any identifying information is collected by the Colorado School of Public Health. There is no record of which students participated, and no student level data is ever contained in reports. With representative data, Jeffco can use this health data in many important ways. First, we can identify health trends and identify changes over time. Second, we can identify and prioritize populations experiencing significant health disparities. Third, we can further support the current work and our interventions in Jeffco schools by making data-driven decisions.
Awesome. All right. Thanks, Christina. The Healthy Kids Colorado survey is a massive data set. The survey for high school is 120 questions, and the middle school survey is 80 questions. As you will see in our data tables, middle school and high school survey sometimes ask slightly different questions. There is health region data as well as district data. Today, we're sharing the district data. The survey covers health behaviors such as substance use and physical activity, as well as social emotional indicators like depression, suicide, and bullying. Lastly, there's information on protective factors. All student responses are broken down by gender, grade level, race and ethnicity, and for high school, sexual orientation. All of this data is compiled into school level reports for each school, a high school and middle school district report, as well as a state report. Christina and I have met with all 22 schools to review their school level reports. As you can imagine, we could present and share for hours and hours on all of this data. However, since we have limited time today, we're going to share from two important categories: First, we will share the key health areas and compelling data points that seem to be of the most interest to schools. Second, we will share a few data points where Jeffco schools is statistically significantly different than the state. For the majority of the survey data, Jeffco mirrors the state and does not significantly differ. Next slide, please. The Healthy Kids Colorado survey results highlight student health behavior disparities based on race and ethnicity and sexual orientation. Given the time and purpose of our presentation today, we will focus on the general population health behaviors. However, we would be remiss in our responsibility to Jeffco Public Schools youth to ignore this part of the survey data. We stand with the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment Equity Statement, which, quote, recognizes that long-standing racism, including economic and environmental injustice, has created negative health outcomes. These systems influence a person's health more than individual behaviors and affect students of color and LGBTQI+ students more than other students, end quote. As we share and address the Healthy Kids Colorado survey data throughout the Jeffco community, we are working hard to recognize and prioritize the needs of students of color and LGBTQI+ students, for then we will truly address the health and academic needs of all of our students. If the PTA is interested in learning more about the health disparities in the data, we would be happy to share this information in another presentation. Next slide, please. The first key health area of interest to schools is substance use. This data table shows the percentage of students who report using alcohol, marijuana, and e-cigarettes in the last 30 days. The data table shows that middle school students are using e-cigarettes at the highest percentage of these substances at 8.7%. And high school students are using alcohol at the highest percentages of these substances at 31.6%. As grade level increases, so does prevalence of substance use. For example, e-cigarette use in 6th grade is only 1.7%, yet this rises to a 12th grade use rate of 36%. Next slide, please. Continuing in the area of substance use, this table shows the percentage of students who think their parents or guardians feel it is wrong or very wrong if they use the following substances. Regarding alcohol, 91.3% of middle school students and 81.4% of high school students think their parents or guardians feel it's wrong for them to use alcohol. Regarding marijuana, 94.9% of middle school students and 85.7% of high school students think that their parents or guardians feel it is wrong for them to use marijuana. Regarding e-cigarettes, 91.9% of high school students think their parents or guardians feel it's wrong for them to use them. The middle school survey asked about traditional cigarette use. 96.6% of middle school students think their parents or guardians feel it is wrong for them to use cigarettes. Lastly, we have a high school data point. 57.7% of high school students report having talked with their parents or guardians about the dangers of tobacco, alcohol, or drug use in the past year. Next slide. Here we have one more data point around substance use. Research shows, that favorable attitudes towards alcohol or drug use and a low perception of risk are risk factors for adolescent substance abuse. This table shows the percentage of students who perceive a moderate to great risk in using alcohol and marijuana regularly. The perceived risk in using the substances decreases from middle school to high school. The strongest decreases in marijuana, with only 46.7% of high school youth perceiving a moderate to great risk in using the substance. We will note later in the presentation that students' perception of substance use is one of the areas where Jeffco is statistically different from the state in an unfavorable direction. Next slide, please. The second key health area of interest to schools is mental health and suicide. Good mental health is critical to student success in school and life. According to the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, 1 in 5 children and adolescents experience a mental health problem during their school years. And this is a number from before COVID. The data tables here show the percentage of Jeffco students who felt so sad or hopeless almost every day for 2 weeks or more during the last year that they stopped doing some usual activities. High school 11th graders reported yes at the highest rate, with 37.2% feeling so sad or hopeless that they had stopped doing usual activities during the last year. Youth mental health struggles reduce quality of life, academic achievement, physical health, as well as can negatively impact relationships with family and friends. Moving on to suicide. Although suicide is the leading cause of death among adolescents in the United States, as well as in Colorado, suicide can be very preventable if there's a comprehensive model of support. This top table shows the percent of students who have considered suicide. 21.3% of middle school students have ever considered suicide, and 17.8% of Jeffco high school students considered death by suicide in the last year. The second table shows the percentage of students who have attempted suicide. 8.1% of middle school students have ever attempted suicide, and 6.6% of high school students have attempted suicide in the last year. This is an area where we are working closely with the Student Services Department to address health disparities within the data. Suicide is always a complex issue, and suicide is never the result of one cause. Next slide, please. Moving on to social media data. Research shows that excessive social media use is linked to an increase in mental health problems, including anxiety and depression. This table is from middle school, and it shows that 40.7% of students reported using social media, video games, and phones for 3 or more hours on an average school day. And for high school social media use, 92.3% of students reported using social media. This data table here shows the frequency at which students reported checking social media. 64.4% reported checking social media at least once or twice an hour, with 11% reporting checking it every few minutes. Next slide, please. The third key health area that's been of great interest to schools is bullying. Research shows that bullying affects all youth involved, including those that are bullied, those who bully others, and those who witness bullying. The negative physical, social, emotional, and mental health effects of bullying may continue into adulthood. This data table shows the percentage of students who report being bullied on school property during the last 12 months. The prevalence of bullying on school property is higher among middle school students than high school students, with 30.7% of middle school students being bullied on school property. In both middle and high school data, students who report being bullied on school property report that the highest rate of bullying takes place in the classroom or hallway. We will note again later in the presentation that middle school bullying is also one of the areas where Jeffco is statistically different from the state in an unfavorable direction. Next slide, please. The last key health area is physical activity. The CDC recommends that adolescents have 60 minutes of physical activity most days per week. This data table shows the percentage of students who were active for at least 60 minutes, 5 days a week. Middle school students are more physically active than high school students, with only 49.9% of high school students getting the recommended amount of physical activity. Research shows that fit, active students report lower stress and anxiety levels, as well as better concentration and memory. Next slide, please. Physical activity and nutrition can often be looked at together. This data table shows the percentage of middle school and high school students who have consumed at least one serving of fruit, vegetables, and soda in the last week. Middle school students report more fruit and vegetable consumption, but also more soda. Then high school students were asked about going hungry due to a lack of food at home. 12.8% of students reported going hungry sometimes, most of the time, or always due to a lack of food at home. Research shows that children from homes that lack consistent access to food are more likely to experience developmental impairments in areas like language, motor skills, and behavior. Next slide, please. When discussing the data with schools, we emphasize the protective factors of positive school climate and school connectedness. This data table shows that 71.3% of middle school students and 74.3% of high school students report having a trusted adult to go to with a serious problem. In addition, 84% of high school students report having a parent or guardian to help with a serious problem. Research shows that one of the greatest protective factors for youth is a positive relationship with at least one trusted adult. Next slide, please. Another protective factor for students is feeling safe at school. Research shows that students who feel safe at school perform better academically and have fewer mental health problems. This data table shows the percentage of students who did not go to school one or more times in the last month because they felt it would be unsafe at school or they would be unsafe on their way to or from school. Middle school students reported feeling less safe, with 17.7% not going to school in the last month due to safety. High school students were asked if they feel safe at school. 81.1% reported that they do feel safe at school. All right, as mentioned at the start of our presentation, in the majority of the Healthy Kids Colorado survey data, Jeffco mirrors the state and the data does not significantly differ. However, we will now share the few data points where Jeffco Public Schools is statistically different than the state. All but one of these are in an unfavorable direction. To measure a statistical difference, we look for a differential of plus or minus 5% in this data. This slide shows some of the areas of difference in the middle school data. These three data points, which are signs of positive school climate and school connectedness, are all potential areas of growth for Jeffco Public Schools due to the data being less favorable compared to the state. The three data points are, first, the percentage of students who saw someone else being bullied on school property in the last 30 days. Second, the percentage of students who described their grades as A's and B's in the last 12 months. And third, the percentage of students who participated in extracurricular activities at school. Next slide, please. Next, there are two more data points where Jeffco Middle School is statistically different from the state in an unfavorable direction. These data points involve student physical activity. The two data points are, first, the percentage of students who have PE class at least one day per average week, and second, the percentage of students who played on a sports team. Next slide, please. Moving on to the high school data, here are two areas of statistical difference from the state. First, just as we saw in the middle school data, the percentage of students who have PE class at least one day per average week is lower than the state. Second, we have a data point where Jeffco is different from the state in a favorable direction. This data point involves students who are sexually active. Jeffco high school students used a method of pregnancy prevention at a higher rate than the state. Next slide, please. And lastly, as we mentioned when discussing substance use, the percentage of students who perceived a moderate to great risk in using alcohol and marijuana regularly is lower than the state. You can see those two data points on the slide. Once again, research shows that favorable attitudes towards alcohol or drug use and a low perception of risk are risk factors for adolescent substance abuse. Christina, are you there for?
Hi, sorry, trying to talk while on mute. Moving forward into the final part of our presentation, we would like to present to you how we have been utilizing the data throughout the district so far. This 2019 data set is merely a jumping off point for schools and departments to understand the health and well-being of students. As more Healthy Kids Colorado survey data sets are available over the years, we can truly begin to track trends, set goals, and monitor progress. Healthy Schools is determined to assist our schools and departments to begin the process of using Healthy Kids Colorado data as indicators to design and measure student health and wellness goals. For this year, Healthy Schools, the Student Engagement Office, and Student Services work together to develop a menu of supports and funding options for schools. The menu of supports is focused on the 5 key health goals that were previously discussed throughout our presentation. Encompassed within all these supports are increased access to professional learning, evidence-based programming, and working to increase inclusive environments. Many of the supports provided within our menu are best practices that already exist within our schools. as we met with schools to review their data reports. The impact of COVID was front and center. First, we can assume that many students' mental health and physical health have declined since the survey last year. Second, the overwhelm of managing COVID within the schools has prohibited some schools from taking full advantage of funding and support thus far. Despite the barrier that COVID has presented, we can share with you how some schools have been able to utilize the data and have begun to make data-driven decisions. As schools and, I'm going to the next slide. Okay, so some schools have chosen to focus on increasing physical activity. Healthy Schools has focused on supporting schools with increasing movement, both in and out of the classroom, with the use of take-home physical activity kits and trainings for educators regarding incorporating movement into the classroom. Some schools have chosen to focus on decreasing substance use through the several programs listed here. Other schools are focused on suicide prevention. One way schools are doing this is by increasing students' feeling of connectedness to their school by matching each student to a trusted adult. This work is so important because we know that students who have a relationship with a trusted adult to go to with a problem is a protective factor against suicide risk. Other ways schools are focusing on suicide prevention include suicide risk assessment training for all mental health staff, and through the use of other campaigns that work to destigmatize mental health and connect students to supports. We will continue to support schools in developing health-driven goals and to determine how the data is being utilized. In addition to meeting with all 22 schools who participated in the survey, we have been working to share the data results through the district and community. As Jeffco schools and departments begin the process of using the Healthy Kids Colorado survey data as indicators to design and measure student health and wellness goals, community partners are doing similar work. The Healthy Kids Colorado survey data is being used extensively by the Jefferson County Communities That Care, or CTC, program. CTC uses an evidence-based community change process focused on preventing substance misuse, sexual relationship violence, and homeless anxiety among youth in our community. The Healthy Kids Colorado survey drives and measures their work in providing resources for parents and other adults who work with our community youth. CTC also provides the NSET class, Navigating Substance Use in Teens, a free 2-hour workshop offering information and support for parents or caregivers whose teen is experimenting with alcohol, marijuana, vaping, or other substances. The next the Jefferson County Public Health Department and RMC Health are using the Healthy Kids Colorado survey data to continue their Start the Conversation classes for parents and caregivers on how to talk with young people about vaping, Juuls, and other electronic nicotine products. These free and virtual classes are held regularly in English and in Spanish. Finally, the Healthy Kids Colorado survey data is being used by those promoting suicide prevention in our community. QPR is an evidence-based suicide prevention gatekeeper model. In 2019, Jeffco schools began the process of training all 14,000 plus Jeffco employees in QPR. And in response to our community and family feedback, Jeffco has started offering QPR trainings to parents and caregivers throughout the district with the help of community partners such as the Jeffco PTA, the Jefferson Center and Partners for Children's Mental Health. This brings us to the final part of our presentation. As you can see, there is so much more data to share and possible next steps on how to use this valuable health information. We have shared similar presentations with the Board of Education, District Health Advisory Committee, the District Accountability Committee, the Family School Community Partnership Subcommittee, and the Jeffco Communities That Care. Having representative data will allow us the opportunity to see trends in how supports and resources provided have impacted our students. This data will continue to be utilized to drive projects throughout the district. The Healthy Kids Colorado survey will be conducted again next fall, and the state sample will be selected this spring. Jeffco's participation in this survey is essential to continue to understand our students' well-being and be strategic in how we provide prevention services. The ability for students to participate in this survey was largely in part to the passive consent model. We look forward to presenting again in 2 years when we can begin to track and respond to trends, as well as review progress in key health areas. If you have any interest in exploring the data further, you can access the high school data via the CDPHE's data dashboard. So we thank you so much for your time, and we are happy.
We are so grateful to you. I've got a little list of questions, and we've got some in the chat. If you don't mind, I'll just go ahead and read those to you, and you can give information, and then those who are here can also unmute themselves after that as well. One question is here regarding the social media related to mental health issues. Do we know what that looks like now during COVID with so much online school and computer FaceTime, which might be increasing the social media use?
Yep. So I don't think that we have any specific data on that currently. And I think, you know, the fall of 21 or this coming fall, we will be able to do the Healthy Kids Colorado survey again to see how the pandemic has really impacted our students.
Right, and you did answer those questions in the chat too. I just want to make sure that we get them recorded so that those who can't join us today have that information. So credit to Christina and Fran for doing that on the side. I just want to make sure everybody has this. Another question here too. So regarding slide 25, these are initiatives or programs that are just recently started as a result of survey results. Yes? Or is there any feedback on how good or difficult this has been during the world of COVID?
I did go back to slide 25, the current supports and data-driven projects throughout the community. Fran, do you want to field that?
Yeah, I think all of these programs were going on before the Healthy Kids Colorado survey came out, but this data is definitely driving a lot of the work, and I think most importantly, really adding important indicators for how to measure the success of these programs.
And I know, I'm not sure if you know too much about the county's Trusted Adult Initiative. For clarification, when was this data taken? When did the kids take the survey?
It was fall of 2019. So anywhere from August through December of 2019.
Okay,
so, and then the kids did do fall of 2020 also?
No, the survey happens every other year.
Okay.
So this fall was a skip year, and then next fall, 2021, is another opportunity to participate.
Okay. I do know, I don't know how much you know about the county's program on the Trusted Adults, but I did sign up for it, so, and haven't heard anything. So also Jeffco 1A did not pass that year either when they started working on this. So it could also be an issue of staffing and resources that they have to really get this rolling, but it's absolutely a phenomenal thing. And thank you for mentioning Jeffco PTA doing the suicide prevention. Really appreciate the district being a partner with this and advertising ours, and we're advertising theirs. Jonna, I know you have your hand raised. Go ahead and unmute and ask your questions.
Thank you, and thank you everybody, Christina and Fran, for being here. Going back to the numbers where Jeffco is different from the state in a negative sort of way or a bad sort of way, are there any theories or anything to give you a clue why we would be that off on some of those things? I mean, I know that there are programs, the districts talked about how you're going to address that. I'm just curious if there's some theories on why we are off like that.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that, when you look at the middle school data and the high school data, what's similar between the two, both in an unfavorable direction compared to the state, is the lower PE. And, each school district gets to decide where they want graduation credits to exist. And so in Jeffco, our students are able to graduate high school with half a credit in either health or physical education. And there's many districts who require more credits in physical education to be able to graduate.
And I mean, I will say, I happen to have that kid. I think everybody has a child here who's been through secondary education, but once you can choose your electives, PE doesn't sound as enticing if you're one of those kids who, well, for us, it was music and theater. So, is there, I started thinking about this one too, without that physical education activity, is there perhaps some place we could put up on the, district website or something, maybe a challenge to kids who are not taking PE, where, you could, maybe roll out, 3 miles of walking or this many steps or, anything, something that doesn't cost money so that everybody could participate in it. So they don't have to buy a Fitbit. But could we have something like that? And then students who choose to enroll in it, I mean, we could acknowledge them for their participation in that.
Yeah, that's a wonderful idea. And we've started thinking about similar things. So I think Christina mentioned really quickly that Healthy Schools created some take-home physical activity kits this year. And those are just at the middle school level. But these were kits that a student could take home for the semester. They have a Frisbee, a jump rope, a ball, a resistance band, and some exercises that students could do, and then a place to sort of track their physical activity, set a goal, and then track their minutes. So we're exploring different ways, kind of programs like you mentioned, and the physical activity kits where we can provide extra physical activity to our secondary students. We're also working a lot on brain breaks, which would happen during the school day, during classes, to just get up and provide some amount of movement. And then at a middle school level, also, we do recommend kind of walking or running clubs for those schools that do have recess. That's a great thing for students to be doing out at recess. And the Healthy Schools funding can go towards some incentives for students or prizes for students who are able to walk a marathon or walk 100 miles over the course of the school year. So great ideas, and we will definitely continue to
well, and we would be happy to help advertise any of that as well and get the information out to our whole email list. If you want to put anything on our website or get anything sent out, that's great.
Awesome. Thank you.
And let's see, we've got another question here too. Okay, so when parents, if you talking to your kids about usage, obviously we've got the 12 Talks with Teens on our website actually as well, so people can find it more easily. Thank you, Dr. Odom, for making sure that that was there. So that's there, and there's some great tools. I don't know if you two are parents or not. What conversations would you recommend having with our kids? What are their key things to say?
Yeah, that's a great question. Christina and I are lucky enough to have younger kids right now, so we haven't had to tackle all this quite yet. But we always recommend the 12 Talks. I'm actually part of that subcommittee on CTC, and I think the resources that are embedded within that website and that program are wonderful. And then also just sticking with sort of local resources that start the conversation workshop for parents. If parents do know that their teens are already starting to try substances, that's another really great local resource.
Great, thank you for answering that. Jonna, you had your hand up again.
Thank you. I was just curious on going back to where Jeffco differs from the state and in a negative way, some of those things. Do we have, and maybe you talked about this in the beginning and I missed it. Do we have an idea of what school areas, what articulation areas, those numbers, how that ranges, if it's worse in some areas than it is in others?
Yeah, that's a great question. So The Healthy Kids Colorado survey data is representative and weighted for the whole district. And we really just look at that full district sample when we're talking about the data. So we never want to talk about, if an individual school wants to share with their community their data, obviously that's great. But when we're talking about the full district, we just look at the district data as a whole, and we're not able to look at specific schools or talk about different areas, just so that schools feel really comfortable taking the survey and don't feel like their data is going to be used in a negative way at all.
That makes sense. Thank you. Yeah.
Well, and I had a couple other questions. We're obviously huge supporters of Safe to Tell, and we try to share all of information for Safe to Tell out there as well, for suicide prevention, but for so many other things. What kids in secondary, I've heard a number of teenagers talk about, the bathrooms at school. It's not as much of a problem this year with COVID, but, they call them vaping rooms. So, and there's not enough staff to try to monitor the bathrooms, but that's what's happening. And I know kids are frustrated, they know, what do you do if you know a friend is vaping? So, I mean, they feel like if, they report, partially they're narking, and partially nothing really happens to the kids who are participating in that. I had some kids approach me asking about, during a school assembly last year, before the pandemic happened, obviously, that kids actually showed up to the assembly high. And people thought it was funny. So kids are not reporting it. What should be happening? What should be happening in our schools? So, and what should kids do when they know what's going on? Because as you know, as we know, as parents, our kids know this stuff is going on with other kids much more than the adults.
Yeah, those are a lot of great points and questions. I might think further and get back to you if some more things come to mind, but on the top of my head, I do have a couple of things. One is I think there is a lot of possibilities around social norming that this data holds. There are some questions we didn't get to present today, but around, how many students think their peers are using substances compared to the actual number. And it's been proven that these social norming sort of campaigns where we're really showing that, hey, 9 out of 10, I'm just making this up, but 9 out of 10 students are not participating in this risky behavior really helps students begin to see that that's not the norm and that they are in the norm for not participating in these substances. So I think that we haven't had a chance this year with COVID just being so intense in schools to sort of make some more student partnerships and counselor partnerships to begin to start some social norming campaigns. But I think that that's really important. And I know Christina and I and Julie are really excited to dive into more of that in the future. And then I also think, there's a lot of our secondary schools do have sources of strength. There's some other great student-led organizations that, part of that is having that trusted adult and really getting that student voice out there. So I think that along with the social norming, we really hope to partner with a lot of those kind of student-led groups to also, help students to answer those questions, because some of them are going to be different school to school, but what do we do when we see our friends using these substances, and how do we create a culture where that's not the norm and that's not okay? So thank you for bringing that up. And I will think if I have some more answers too.
Sure. Yeah. I all of this is kind of on the spot stuff. So, yeah, any ideas that you have are completely welcome. I know, those of us who, have kids in the schools are really concerned about this, and we all know kids who are doing it, and not really sure what to do. Now, I also know, and we talked about this, maybe Julie talked about it, or one of you talked about it, previously, kids who are caught vaping at the school. I know that someone in the office was kind of keeping the, vaping stuff that was taken from the kids, and so that we could try to figure out if it's marijuana, if it's, juuling, those kind of things. And then what's done with it? What happens after that?
That's also a great question, and I might need to get back to you after talking with a colleague. But I do know what you're, yeah, and I'm not sure if this year it's different than previous years. I feel like I was more up to date on it maybe last school year, but the collecting of the substances to really try to understand, you know, the amount of vaping that's happening in schools. I know that that's all collected by facilities and is disposed of in a proper way, because it's not supposed to just be put in the landfill. But kind of what happens in between there and how that's all calculated, I would say that Kiki Stickler in Office of Student Engagement, she would be the best person to ask, but I can loop us kind of all together in that.
It's actually probably Kiki who was talking to us about that, because she did a program for us last January. So, and yeah, it was actually a phenomenal program. So yeah, I would love any information that you might have that we can add in here. Does anyone else have any other questions? I know Dr. Odom's on here, and she is mainly our resource for everything health and wellness. So we have so much on our website because of her. And Lori, if you want to speak up, please do. My other Lori, please speak up too if you have other questions. Go ahead, Jonna.
Just a comment. Are you guys bracing yourself for what the 2021 survey is going to look like after a year of COVID? I mean, you know, we know a lot of the bad behaviors that COVID's probably going to have encouraged a lot of bad behaviors. These numbers are going to look devastating. Thinking about any adjustments that will need to be made either in the survey or before they take the survey?
Yeah, it will be really interesting, and I'm really glad that going into this, Jeffco already has this representation of this data set that we do, because I think that it's only from there that we can start to sort of see how things are changing. So really happy that we have this data set. We don't really control what's on the survey. All of that is through Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment and Colorado School of Public Health. I know they are adding some new survey questions, so it will be interesting to see what those are. I know they're mostly around the health disparity data. But I think we will be, really encouraging all the schools who took the survey to take the survey again, even if they're not part of the state sample, just so that those schools do have some really good indicators to see, how have their students changed, what have been some results. And then we will just keep hopefully getting more and more schools to be able to participate, so that all schools and all departments in Jeffco really have these good indicators to be able to assess and measure student wellness.
Thank you. Any other questions? Lori, go right ahead.
I just wanted to ask you to elaborate on something you said in the beginning about passive approval by Dr. Glass.
Yeah, so as Christina shared, so there was 2 years, like 2011 and 2013, Jeffco did not participate at all in the Healthy Kids Colorado survey. There was not a lot of community support due to the sensitive nature of the questions. And then in 2013 and 15, Jeffco schools tried to participate, and many schools did participate and students participated. But the way it was structured, we're following a board policy that basically states that if there's sensitive information in a survey, that there needs to be parental approval for students to participate in that survey. And so every single secondary student had to bring home a permission form, and those had to come back opting their students in to take that. And so it's very different than just students being, given the survey. And so I shouldn't say that though. So parents are still informed that the survey is going to happen. And every student does take home a permission slip, but the permission slips only need to come back if the family is opting their students out. And that was successful. We did estimate we had around like 5% of families opt out their students, and there's a really great path for that to happen. So if families are hearing this and they're like, you know what, this is not for me, there's definitely a really safe path of communication there to be able to opt out your student. But
Just to clarify, Jeffco PTA, Colorado PTA also was advocating for more students and more schools and more districts to use the Healthy Kids Survey, because we really need this data to be able to serve our students fully. Unfortunately, it kind of became political, and I'm not a staff member, so I'll just say whatever I want. It kind of became political. So I imagine, sending that information out to secondary parents and say, oh, if you want to participate in a survey, asking your kids, various questions, that you don't get the answers to, sign up here. And that doesn't work. So, opting out with, here it is. You can actually look online and see what questions they ask. So we know that they're doing, it's private, it's anonymous. It's not like anybody's tracking your kids. That was another, political thing that got thrown out there that was totally false. Kids answer the things, and, let's just say it's not happening in my house, but, let's just say my daughter was, using drugs, and, she's smoking marijuana, and she's going to parties and drinking, and so, and even if she participates in the survey, I will not find out. So in that way, that's not what the survey is used for. The survey is used for our health services departments in all of our school districts and the state CDE to better serve our students and to help with messaging. So, with CDPHE, what speaks to the kids to get them to stop this kind of activity. So, and, Jonna was involved with me too. She and I go to all the school board meetings for years and years. And our school board did finally make the right decision and said, yes, we're going to do the Healthy Kids Survey, and it's opt out instead of opt in. So, but it is very private and secure for the kids and families. So nobody's selling your information. Nobody's taking your data. I don't even think they collect IP addresses. So on the survey takers. So I don't think they do any of that. And the kids can actually do it at school on school devices. So, or, they can do it on I think they can do it on their phones or Chromebooks or whatever that they take home as well.
They just do it at school, but you're right. You never even have to enter in your student ID even to log into the survey. So it's completely anonymous, as you're saying.
Okay.
And thank you for adding all of that too. The one thing I could add is that, that board policy does still exist. And so in order to move forward with passive consent next fall, we're hoping that Christopher Hsu is able to waive that policy again.
Okay, so since it is board policy, that's probably an action that we can take as Jeffco PTA to ask our board members to get that changed so that it's an opt-out instead of an opt-in. So Jonna, as our legislative chair, would you mind throwing that together on behalf of Jeffco PTA, and we will get that out to Christopher Hsu and to every board member to make sure that happens. So because we do need this data.
Awesome, that's wonderful. Thank you so much.
And Lori Odom, I assume you agree with this as well as our health and wellness chair?
Very much. Thanks so much for making those very important points, because that truly is what allowed this survey to be conducted and get such valuable information. And Fran, I know you did a tremendous amount with the schools too to make this, get the data and help the schools do the survey. So thank you so much. This information is so important for now and for the future and the COVID times that we're going to be moving through, and knowing how we can best help the kids. And the summary that you both gave is wonderful. There's so much information, and thank you for distilling that to make it such a very helpful summary for Jeffco. There's one other little bit that with the marijuana that's a bit concerning in terms of Jeffco, and that is compared with the state, I believe there's a much higher percentage of kids vaping marijuana and getting the high dose THC, which has become more and more of a problem. And we're much higher in Jeffco than the state, even in vaping. I don't think in dabbing as much. They're both increasing gradually in Colorado. So the high dose cannabis is really becoming an issue. And I think your idea about having Kiki talk some more about her very positive approach in working with, I think, all the nurses in the schools to not have the students be let out of school who are involved with the substance use, but rather helping them understand the negative aspects and stay in school and work with the students. And I think she's really doing a great job. So it'd be wonderful to have her talk again, I think.
Yeah, I think that's a wonderful idea, Lori. So, do you mind reaching out and seeing what we can do? If we can do maybe one of these extra events with her. So to get an update, since she did such a phenomenal job last year, do you mind doing that? Wonderful.
Not at all.
And can
I-
you tell me what is dabbing? So, I mean, I know, get there. So what did that mean?
Well, what it is getting a concentration of THC, the tetrahydrocannabinol, that is the psychoactive component, straight from the marijuana. It's literally melted down and then ingested, or they inhale it, and it gets over 95% concentration of the THC. The marijuana in the 60s was maybe 3% THC concentration, and now it's well over 60% on average, but even higher when it's either vaped or the highest being dabbing. And it does look like that can cause more of the psychologic problems when it is in such high concentration.
Wow.
So it's an issue of great concern, and
Well, and
probably
that's,
much higher addiction rate too.
it is hard to follow all the lingo that the kids are using. So, these new words for parents, you're trying to get by, gosh, you're trying to get by during COVID. So with teenagers seeking independence, and then, we have all these other words and vocabulary coming up that cause additional issues for us. So thank you for that. We probably should put out a little bit more on that so parents understand all of the code names that we need to be knowing, and need to be looking for and talking to our kids about. That's certainly going to be helpful. So let's get that going. Gosh, there was something else I was thinking of. Go ahead, Fran.
I was just going to say, I think part of the 12 talks to have with teens is definitely, I think part of that mission is to make sure that those new words are included in each of those topics. So I can kind of just look through those talks with that lens, because I don't think we've done that in the last year, and things may have even changed in the last year. So I can work with the CTC folks and make sure that each of those pages kind of has new lingo and words on there.
Yeah, and we would be happy to put, any of that in. We actually have an acronym guide, and and we can put any of that on our website too if we need another guide so that parents know what we need to be talking about. But let's get that accessible so that everybody has access to it. Goodness, there's so much information here. So we are so grateful to you, though. I just, we've taken an hour of your time. So I'm just going to, first of all, say huge thank you. I've got my pom-poms with me. Thank you, Fran. Thank you, Christina. Thank you, Julie, for helping organize this. We are so privileged to have you being a part of the Jeffco team. So thank you for joining us, and thank you for taking the time with us today. Really appreciate it.